So you've already cut your strips for your binding, and now what we need to do is we need to make one continuous strip. So I've got a heap of scrap fabric here, and it's different sizes and all the rest of it. That doesn't matter. You can have it really scrappy, or it can be the width of your fabric. That's up to you. You want to cut it about 2.5 inches. No bigger than that before your table runner, 2.5 inch strips. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your strips, and we'll just move our table runner out of the way. Okay, you're going to take one of your strips, and then you're going to take your other one, so one with the pretty side facing up, and then the other one with the pretty side facing down, and you're going to create a piece that looks like this. You're going to grab yourself a pin, and you're just going to have the fabric just going about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch past. Okay, so it just looks like that, and then all I do is I just will pin that into place so it just holds there. I'm just going to grab my ruler, and I'm going to, at this junction here, I'm going to draw a line from here to here. So you can see there I've got like a little right angle on the top and the bottom, and then just using my friction pen or a pencil, just going to mark on the back a diagonal line. Okay, just like so. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch on that line. Okay, now we want to take our if you've still got your open toe foot on, you want to take that off, and then you want to put your 1/4 inch foot back on. Okay, so we're going to, as I said, we're going to stitch on that line, and you want to do a back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Put that out of the machine, snip off your excess threads, and you're going to repeat that until you've sewn all of your pieces together. Then you're just going to grab your scissors, and you're going to trim off about to 1/4 inch without going into that stitching. Okay, and then there we go, we have joined our pieces together. The next thing that you've got to do is to prepare it. So you need to have your iron and your ironing pad, and what you're going to do is you are going to go to that seam that you just sewed, and you're going to open that seam up. Okay, and you're going to press that as flat as you can. What that does is it's going to disperse the bulk of those seams, and it's going to make it sit a lot nicer. Alright, the next thing you want to do is you just want to fold, so you've got your pretty side facing down and the wrong side of the fabric facing up, and you want to bring your raw edge up to the raw edge. And then you're just going to press that in place. And you're going to do that along the entire length of the sewn pieces that you just sewed. Okay? And that is how we create our binding. Now, as I said, I often make scrappy bindings so I can use up all the little bits and pieces that I have in my scrap bin, and then that way I don't have a lot of wasted fabric. So you're going to do that for the entire length of your table runner binding. And so here's one that I prepared earlier, so you can see there it's quite long. I'm going to give that a little bit of a press, and then I'm going to show you how to put that onto your table runner. Okay, so you've got your table runner, and you're going to take one end of your binding strips. Okay, about halfway you're going to place that down. You're going to grab some pins, or you're going to grab some wonder clips, and you're going to pin that into place. Now I do have a join there, so I'm just going to go the other way, see how that goes. Pretty sure that'll be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to place some clips just to hold that into place for just a second, and then next I'm going to grab a pin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down a little way from where the edge of this is. I'm going to come down to about here. So that's about 6 to 8 inches down, and I'm going to pop a pin just there, and that is where I'm going to start stitching from, not up here, because I want this to remain loose, so when I come back around I can show you how to join your binding together so it's continuous. All right, I will leave a clip however on there to just hold that in place. Okay, so I've got my pin where I'm going to start stitching from, and basically I will just pop another clip in there just to hold it in place while I take it to the sewing machine. Alright, so next thing we need to do with our 1/4 inch foot still on our machine, we need to sew our binding on. So I'm just going to move that a little bit closer. We're going to pop our little table runner into the machine, and we're going to bring our needle to where that pin is, and we're just going to put our needle in the down position, not on top of the pin, because we now are going to remove that, and then we are going to start to stitch. Now we are going to do a little bit of a back stitch there. Okay, so we're just going to come down 1 or 2 stitches, and then we're going to go back. My machine does 3 stitches back. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to travel 1/4 inch down to here, and that's where our corner of our table runner is. So you can see the corner just there. Okay, we're going to come down about 1/4 inch away from that. All right, now if you need to, you can measure, or you can just eyeball it. I'm pretty good with the 1/4 inch now, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that pin back into it and know that I have to stop there. So just grab that pin, keeps escaping from me. So I'm going to put the pin there, and I know that I have to stop with my needle in the down position at that pin, not on it, but at it, just before it. Okay, so I've already done my back stitch, and I'm just going to stitch down, and as I come up to that pin, I'm going to stop with the needle in the down position. I'm going to remove that pin and just set it aside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my fabric, so I'm going to sew off this corner on a 45-degree angle. And that's it. Okay, I'll then pull this out and I'll show you what it looks like. Get rid of that thread. And you can see here I've come down and then I've sewn off that corner. Okay. So I probably could have come down a little bit further. I didn't quite make it. All right, so I want to come down to about that, where that mark is, or where that pin is. And you can use a mark. You don't have to have a pin in there. It's just whatever's easy for you. So I didn't quite come down to it. So what I'll do is I'll put the back in the machine, and I'll do a quick back stitch. Okay, that's worked better that time. Okay, so you can see here I've come down at that line, I've turned, and I've sewn off the edge. So that is off the corner now. So if I move that binding, you can see it's off the corner. All right, the next thing that we need to do is we need to turn this corner. So this is going to help us get our mitered corner. So we're going to bring that up. So again, we have our fabric like so. Okay, we've just stitched our binding down. We're going to grab this tail. We're going to bring it up on itself, and you can see by doing that stitch it's creating that 45-degree angle that we need for the mitered corner. I'm going to press that into place with my finger, and then with this hand I'm just going to hold that tip just there, and then I'm going to bring this fabric on top of itself and down. Okay, all the while holding that fabric with my other hand in place. And now what I want it to do is I want this fold to line up with this raw edge here. So as I come in closer, you can see that they're just lining up nicely, and that little trick that we just did with sewing off the edge gives us a really nice mitered corner. So at this point I'm going to place a clip there and then a clip just down a little bit. Okay, that way I can move it to the sewing machine without it getting out of the way. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to stitch down here and I'm going to stop about 1/4 inch away, and then I'm going to sew off on that angle. Okay, so I'm going to stitch down, I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to sew off in that 1/4 inch. So I'll bring that up a little bit closer for you. So we're going to sew down to the line, we're going to have our needle in the down position, and then we're going to sew off to that corner. So you can see there that that's what it's going to look like. All right, so let's go and do that, and then when we get back around to our last corner, so we've got this one and then we've got these two, and when we get back around here I'm going to show you how to join this. What's going to happen is we're going to start on the edge. Okay, so just there like so, and we're just going to stitch that. You are going to do a couple of little back stitches. It's just going to secure that in place, and then we're going to stitch along. And take our clip off. And we're going to turn like we did last time, and we're going to stitch straight off. And you can see here that now when we turn that over, we've got a beautiful mitered corner. Okay, so we're coming around to where we need to join our binding together so we don't have two tails. So what you need to do is, once you've done that last mitered corner, you're going to come down about 2 or 3 inches, and you're going to do a back stitch, and you're going to take your little table runner out of the machine. Get rid of all your excess threads and everything so they don't become a little bit of a problem for you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to leave our clip in place, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to lay this top tail. Okay, so this is where we started. Okay, this is where we're ending. We've just come around our last corner. Okay, and what we need to do is attach these two. So basically we're going to lay this on top, and we're just going to clip that into place for just a moment, and that's going to lay it there nicely. And I'll put another one up here just so I know that that's in the right position. Okay, now you want to leave a tail about 6 inches on this side, and you want the same on this side as well. The bigger the project, the longer you might want to leave it. I wouldn't leave it any more than 10 inches if I was doing a quilt, but I work within the 6 to 8 inch range. Okay, then you can see that this bottom one, which is our starting point, that's the one that was there when we've come back around to it, is just sticking out a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to grab my ruler. Okay, and what I do with my binding, so I know that I'm not going to get any puckers or anything like that, whatever width I've cut my binding, and in this case it was 2.5, I'm going to cut this here, this excess top one, so it's about 2.5 inches, 2.25 inches apart. So I'll just show you what I mean. So I've got the bottom one, and then I've got the top one clipped on into place. I place my ruler along that bottom one, and then I'm just going to get my pencil, and I'm going to count 2.25 inches. So 1, 2 1/4, and I'm going to just put a little mark on our top binding strip there. So this here I'm going to cut off. That's where I'm going to cut. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut straight along that line, okay, and only the top one, not the bottom one. Okay, so you can see here I've got now 2 bits. Now it's really important that you don't cut this bottom one, okay? We are just cutting the top bit here. All right, so now you can unclip it, move your scissors out of the way, and you can remove your ruler. So remember when we joined our binding together, we made that L shape. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our top binding piece and we're going to open that up and lay that with the pretty side facing up. Then we're going to take our bottom piece and we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to open that up, except this time we are going to bring it over, and this is why you need that little bit extra, and we're going to lay them on top of one another. But this time we're not actually going to go past the fabric. So we're going to actually align our raw edges. I mean, if it goes a little bit, that's okay. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the pin in it. Where'd it go? There. There it is. I'm going to place that pin like so. And then I'm going to grab my other pins and I'm going to place it over here like so. Now I want to make sure that this is laying nice and flat. There's no puckers underneath. Then I'm just going to grab my ruler and I'm going to go from corner to corner. Now I will have to lift my fabric up just a little bit to make sure I'm going corner to corner, getting that nice 45-degree angle. Use my friction pen so you can see it. Okay, and I'm just going to draw on there, and you can see that that's going in the diagonal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put that into the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch on that line, back stitching at the beginning and back stitching at the end. Now the reason that I measure 2 1/4 for a 2 1/2 inch binding is because what will happen is that will stop it from getting a little pucker as we sew down. And you can leave it at 2 1/2 if you cut that top tail, but 2 1/4 is much better. It just gives you a better finish. All right, so we've now got our 2 pieces stitched, pinned together, and now we're going to stitch them into place. So just basically not onto excuse me, so we're not sewing it onto the table runner, we're just sewing our strips together like we did before. And just do a little bit of a back stitch and make sure that you stitch on that line. And a back stitch to end. Okay, so we can now pull that out. And before I go cutting anything, I always like to check to make sure that that is going to work. So I just fold that back on itself, and I can see there that that is stitched together beautifully. And now what I need to do is take out that excess fabric. So I open that back up again, and you can see where I've just sewn onto that line. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to trim the excess fabric off. So I'm not going to trim where these strips are meeting, I'm going to trim these little triangles off. Using about 1/4 inch, and I'll just gauge it. And then I'll take that off. And then what I do is I just finger press this open. So I open up that seam and then I can finger press that open like so, and then that will just fold on itself. It's got no bulk there, and you can see we've got a beautiful join there. And then all I need to do is just put some clips in place to hold that, head over to the sewing machine, and where I finished up here, I'm going to start there doing a back stitch, and I'm going to come all the way down to where I started and do a back stitch there. And then we'll be ready to hand sew our binding on. Just make sure that all your raw edges are lining up on the edge of your table runner. And there we go, our binding is now on. that out, get rid of all our excess bits and pieces. There we go. Now I like to go around and get rid of all our scraggly little bits and pieces off our binding that has been there from sewing it on. So all our beginning and ending threads. Okay, if you've got some fabric that frays a little bit, then trim that stuff off as well. Any dog ears that you might have on there, you can just trim them off as well. Okay, and now we're ready to basically hand sew our binding on the back. All right, so I'm just going to flip that over. Just move all this out of the way. All right, so now that we've got our binding on, we've flipped it over. Some bits and pieces hanging around. We need to get rid of those. All right, okay. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Wonder Clips, and these are great. These are really good for holding your binding in place. And I'm going to start a little ways down from the corner, and I'm just going to roll that over onto the back. And you want to cover the stitch mark. So you can see I've got my stitch line from where I've sewn the binding on, and that's what I'm covering up. Okay. And then I'm coming up to a corner. Now what I do is I just make sure that all my binding is rolled over, and you can see here that I'm coming along, and that's just making a triangle at this end. So I'm going to now spin it, and then I'm going to bring that binding over on itself, and you can see here that we've got a nice mitered corner on the back, and we've also got one on the front. You do have to play around a little bit. It doesn't always like to lay as flat as it should do. And then I just pop a clip onto there. And the reason I do this at this point is just in case I need to unpick a little bit of the binding on the front to just get it to sit a little bit better. But if you're getting a nice mitered corner on the back, your mitered corner on the front is good too. And there you go, we're just rolling that over. Again, we just make sure that everything is sitting nicely. If you've got any threads that you need to get out of the way, get them out of the way. And you can see there that that just basically folded over onto itself and gave me a nice corner on the back. That little tip of sewing on the 45-degree angle is awesome for helping with mitered corners. Okay, so this is where we started. So again, I'm just going to run that along, make that little triangle, bring it back on itself, line up these corners in down here. So I've got a nice 90-degree angle, and then pop on some clips. So you can see there that it's all nice on the front, and we've got some really nice mitered corners here, although you can't see that one. So that looks good on that side, and it looks good on the other side, as you just seen. Now what we need to do is hand stitch that into place. Now I'm a little bit of a traditionalist when it comes to stitching the binding down. I like to sew it on the front and then hand stitch it on the back, and I just have always done it that way, and yeah, so I will continue to do it that way. Alright, so what we need to do is we've got our needle. Again, you are going to bring 2 strands of cotton together. You can have a knot at the bottom, or you can just fold it over. So I generally always start with a loop method. Okay, and what I do is I'll start somewhere here. So I just pull that binding back a little bit, and above where I've sewn the bind, like you've got that stitch line, I will just go in there between. Basically I will take a little bit of the backing fabric and the wadding, but not go through to the front. Okay, I will then just basically do a loop knot, and that's going to hold that in place. Okay, so let's come a little bit closer, and that way you will be able to see what I'm actually doing when I'm stitching this. Okay, so you can see here we have our binding. I've secured that in place, so that is not going anywhere. And now what I want to do is I want to come out in the crease of my binding. Okay, and then I'm going to go in just under that without going through to the front of my table runner. And then, so I've got the thread coming out here. We're going to go in where just below that thread through the backing and the wadding, and then about 1/2 inch up I'm going to bring my needle out in that crease of the binding, and then I'm just going to pull that down. Then I'm going to repeat that all the way along, so going underneath where my thread's coming out in the binding, and then about 1/2 inch going down. And what that does is actually creates an invisible stitch. So see how you can't see it? Alright, it is actually a blind hem stitch that I'm doing, and sometimes your thread will get caught up on the wonder clip, so just be aware of that. Okay, so you can see that it's just disappearing. Okay, and we just go along and do that. And as long as you go in directly under where your thread is coming out, it will disappear, and you do not want to go through to the front. So I always keep my finger underneath, and if I feel that needle come through, then I know that I've gone through to the front, and I can pull that out then. Another thing that I like to do is I like to double my thread. I know that not everybody doubles their thread for binding, but I like to have 2 strands, and I like to use a Gutermann thread because it is quite a durable and strong thread, especially for things like table runners and placemats and all that sort of stuff. Alright, so we're going to continue that on, and when I come to the end of my thread I will show you how I finish that off. Okay, so we don't want to come up too far into our binding, we just want to come into where that crease is, and as I said, we don't want to go through to the front, otherwise you will see little stitches all the way along the front. Okay, so basically if you just slide your needle on this angle that I've got it in right now, you will be able to so on this sort of angle here, you will be able to just go with the backing and the wadding without coming into the front. Okay. And hopefully you can see that pretty clearly. So you can see there, you can't see any of my stitches, and if you can, it's a very, very minuscule amount of the stitch that you can see, and you can see that that's stitching down quite nicely. It's not rolling or anything like that. Alright, so you might be wondering what we do when we come to a mitered corner. So I'm just going to move my sewing machine out of the way because we do not need that anymore, and that way we can get a good look. So we're coming up to our mitered corner, and all I do for that is exactly what I'm doing right now, except I do a couple of stitches there in the one spot. So we can take that off, and we can get our mitered corner to sit nicely. I'll pop that back there just to hold it. Okay, and then I'm just going to stitch along until I come up to it. Alright, so the next stitch that I'm going to do is going to come into that mitered corner. So again, I do exactly the same. The only thing is that now I will come through that fabric and right in to the corner of that binding here. And then what I'll do is I'll go down right at that corner again and come up next to that spot, and I'll do that twice. So I come in to attach it, and then I do 2 stitches, and you can see there that that is given a little bit of extra security, and I'm ready now to come down this way. and then I will just go back down into that binding where I done the double stitch and come out, and essentially what will happen is that will disappear now. Okay, so I've got a really good secure corner, and I've done 3 stitches, and then I've gone down in that stitch, come down, and then come out into the binding, and now I can just continue on. And that's how I do all my corners on my quilts, because my quilts are used and washed and thrown in the washing machine and dragged around by little kids and big kids as well, and so I just want that extra security on that corner. And things like bindings on table runners and placemats and all that sort of stuff really do need to have that security. Alright, so I'm going to continue on with that, and I'm almost to the end of my thread. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to finish it off. Alright, so we'll say this is my last stitch, okay, and we're just going to straighten our threads up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down into that spot, but I'm just going to roll that binding back a little bit, and I'm just actually going to go above, so just above where, so it's come out here in the backing, and I've just gone above where it's come out, and now I'm just going to give that a little bit of a tug and then tuck it up and come out again in that same spot and do a knot, and then I'll do another one, and this all gets concealed up into the binding. And then what I'll do is I will thread the needle up through the binding, give that a bit of a tug, and that will pop it up into there, and then I will snip that off, and then that just buries that thread. So you can see there, get rid of that thread. Alright, and basically that has now hidden it. I haven't come through to the front, I've gone all the way along, and that's all stitched into place, and I'm going to continue on doing that, and then that is how you put your binding on. So okay, so I've come all the way back around, and this is where I've started. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stitch between the stitches for 2. Okay, so this is where 1 stitch is, this is where I started. So I'm going to bring that out between those 2 stitches, just like I've done with the other ones. And then I'm going to come between the next 2 stitches. So it's 1, 2, and then I'm going to end it off. So all I do for that is I do another stitch to secure that in place, and then I will do a little bit of a slip knot, and then I will go up directly where that stitch is and pop that up into the seam, and then snip that off against the fabric, give it a little bit of a flick, and then that little thread is now buried, and that's it. Our binding is on. So I'll just bring that camera out just a touch, and you can see there that it's all sewn down and it's all sorted on the front. We've got our mitered corners, and we've got rid of all our bits, and our applique is down, and that's it. You have now finished your table runner. So I hope you enjoyed the magazine and the couple of extra patterns that we put in for you this time, and our supplementary videos. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up down below, and subscribe to the channel while you're here for more great how-to videos on how to finish things and all that sort of stuff coming in future issues. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.